Thank you to our partners in Naturally New York and Naturally New England. Excited today to feature the work of Kerry, an international leader in taste and nutrition, and a great partner of the Naturally Network. Helping companies to understand and utilize flavor is an important part of Kerry's work. The Kerry taste charts help brands to determine which flavors and ingredients are most compelling to people across the world. Their data-backed predictions are sorted by location, application, and stage of adoption. Amy Devitt, Kerry's Senior Activation Marketing Manager, will give a presentation about these charts, followed by a Q&A. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen. It might take a second to populate, but thank you for that intro, Jim. And for those who are not aware of who Kerry is, we are an ingredient company, and we are a global ingredient company. So what you're about to see here is obviously going to be a snapshot of United States data, but we also have this type of data in every region that we do business in. So say you're looking to expand in the Mexico market and the Canadian market, we definitely can kind of pull that data for you specifically. But this is specifically for the United States and kind of being a leader in food and beverage, coming forth and being a thought leader when it comes to taste trends is a huge initiative that we have every single year, and kind of the methodology behind all of our taste charts. So every year, like I mentioned, and we've been doing this for over a decade at this point, we combine all sorts of different data resources, all the ones that we partner with in the industry, and then also using our own proprietary methods, we populate what we call our taste charts. And like I said, they're globally facing, but typically the charts that we do every year are outlined here on the right-hand side. So sweet, savory, salty snack, beverage, hot and dairy based, and then beverage, cold and water based. And then we have some additional new charts this year that aren't listed here that we'll get to in a bit. But like Jim kind of mentioned, we structure these into different buckets. So the mainstream buckets are going to be those flavors that have remained firm favorites for the past 5 years. So the top flavors in the category. Key are going to be those next top flavors for the past 5 years. Up and coming are going to be those fastest growing flavors in the past 3 years, which is usually what we say is truly the sweet spot of what's trending. And then emerging flavors are going to be those ones that are the fastest growing in the last year. So the best way to kind of understand this methodology is to really just kind of see it come to life here in the next slide, starting with our savory chart. So savory for us includes appetizers, soups, sauces, main meals, meats, meat alternatives, seafoods, dips, salads, dressings, anything that would fall under a savory category. And these charts are both holistic for both retail and food service. And we feel that that is totally fine because obviously we know that retail follows food service trends pretty closely. So it's kind of a really holistic look at what's going on in the market specifically for the savory application. So starting in mainstream, those top flavors for the past 5 years are going to be very heavily pantry ingredients. So you see the garlic, the tomato, the smoke, the onion, the basil, 2 different types of cheeses being called out, specifically that cheddar and that Parmesan, and then also the influence of some heat, so the jalapeno, and just generically the chili peppers. And then new this year, teriyaki did break into the mainstream, which is pretty exciting to see a global flavor profile kind of be recognized as a mainstream flavor for all savory applications. But key in the next category, again, going to see a lot of pantry ingredients. There's some more spice influences with the chipotle chili and the buffalo, but then also some more global flavor profiles, probably the more mainstream ones with that taco seasoning and the Italian herb blend. But up and coming is, like I said, the really sweet spot of what's trending. So this one, it's really exciting, obviously, to see Korean barbecue. I think we've all seen the growth and the impact that Korean barbecue has had over the past couple of years. That is leading the way in a lot of different applications. Elote is also one that we've seen grown exponentially, as well as Nashville Hot, no longer just being an LTO limited time offering, but now coming into kind of a more consistent flavor profile that we're seeing everywhere. Another big trend that I would call out in this up and coming is kind of the premiumization of the classics. So instead of just, an onion, a simple mirepoix type profile, it's caramelized onion, driving that savory enhancement, driving that umami and that kokumi effect to make things more premium, to make things more craveable, to make something that's really familiar, just elevated to consumers. I'd also call out kind of the sweet and spicy influence. Again, I think heat and spice is always going to win with consumers. Consumers are constantly craving more sophisticated flavor profiles, especially when it comes to heat. So the sweet and spicy movement's been really prevalent. The Swassy movement, if anyone is in marketing and has heard that word, that's a fun mashup there. But then the last thing I'd call out for up and coming is also just the influence of Asian cuisine in general. You have that wasabi, you have the lemongrass, the miso, all of these things that we find in Asian dishes and Asian cooking coming to the forefront of a lot of up and coming flavor profiles across savory categories. Emerging. Fastest growing flavors for the last year. So this one can be quite the grab bag of different things. Is this just one crazy LTO that Trader Joe's launched this year? Or is this going to be the next big thing? And I think this year's list is a really, really exciting one. So some of the more basic things here that you're probably looking at like, what? Like that's odd that that's in there. Cajun is having a really big resurgence in popularity, which is exciting to see. I think Applewood smoke is interesting because obviously smoke flavor is imparted in a lot of categories already, but having that descriptor of Applewood on pack is drawing consumers in, just having a little bit more specificity to the different smoke types. Calling out the different types of barbecue. So Carolina Gold, so that more mustardy based type barbecue profile is continuing to linger, especially after a few years ago, if anyone remembers our taste chart presentation. Kind of having those localized favorites. American regional cuisine was a big thing, especially during the pandemic, because we weren't able to travel, we weren't able to go out to eat, so we really fell in love with the cuisines in our own backyard. But peach barbecue is also emerging, so thinking about the sweet influence, the sweet and savory pairings. I would also call out yuzu as a huge one, especially in beverage, but we're seeing yuzu kind of explode in sauces and marinades when it comes to savory applications. Also the mango influence, again, that sweet and savory. And then just a lot of really, really fun ones. Chili crisp. I think we saw a lot of those at Expo West, if anyone was there, as well as the salsa matchas, kind of that textural spice and heat influence. Birria is also one that absolutely exploded during the pandemic. At Kerry, I work with a lot of culinary people, and I remember telling them, chef, the girls are making birria on TikTok, and they're like, what? That's such a traditional, slow cooking, labor intensive dish, traditionally made with goat. But everyone kind of figured out what it was, fell in love with it. And I bet a lot of us have had quesadillas in the past couple of months. And then more of that Asian influence, I would call out the teriyaki seasoning is also one that's grown a ton with the movement of sushi being more of a mainstream cuisine, and the Thai basil as well. So lots of really, really great flavors here for savory applications. I think another kind of bonus chart that we have that isn't specific to one type of cuisine type, but rather all food and beverages holistically, is our cuisine charts. And the reason we developed these is because in savory, obviously you see a lot of global cuisines trending. And I think we all see that larger trend that global cuisines are trending. Consumers want more street food. Consumers are looking for these more adventurous taste experiences. So we made the cuisine chart to really map out, okay, what are those global cuisines that are trending specifically? So mainstream, kind of the same methodology here, but I'd say these are going to be your top DoorDashed cuisine types: the Italian, the Mexican, the Chinese, the Tex-Mex. But as you go down the line here, you just start to see more hyper-regionalized versions of these different cuisine types. So key, calling out that Thai, even Hawaiian is growing. I think Hawaiian Bros as a chain is one of the top growing chains in terms of volume and units. Indian obviously has had a huge movement in the US, Cuban as well, Japanese. And then up and coming, that sweet spot, that's where we see the Korean. And this is where we start to see, people just don't want Asian food anymore. They don't want just Chinese food. They want Szechuan Chinese food. They're becoming more educated. They're being exposed to more of these nuanced cuisine types, and they're asking for them by name, which is really exciting. And then emerging, the big one here is kind of the influence of how African cuisine is starting to make its way over. I think West African cuisine and the piri movement was probably the bigger one that kind of started this, but now we're starting to see Ethiopian and Moroccan, all of these different things come through, as well as some more of the European influences as well, as people kind of explore Northern Europe as well in that peninsula. The next chart I have is sweet. So this is going to include candies, confectionaries, cookies, desserts, cereals, all the sweet baked goods, all of the yogurts, ice creams, granolas, snack bars, anything that's a sweet treat. And mainstream should be no surprise to anyone. We got our milk chocolate, strawberry, and vanilla, the 1, 2, and 3. Also some of the more mainstream fruit types, the blueberry, cherry, banana, and then also caramel, and then dark chocolate as well. It made it into that category this year. And then key is very heavily influenced by more fruit influences and a little bit more of those warming flavors. You have the salted caramel instead of just the regular caramel, the fudge instead of just a chocolate type. And then the beloved pumpkin spice, she's made her movement swift through culture. She is in the key. I think Starbucks technically celebrated their 20th anniversary of pumpkin spice this year, which surprised me because I don't remember pumpkin spice growing up a lot. But apparently they've been doing it for 20 years, and that's why we see it in the key there, is really taking over when it comes to especially those seasonality, those seasonal LTO flavor profiles that emerge. Up and coming for sweet things this year, one big key trend is sweet things that taste like other sweet things. And then taking it one step further is kind of the retro movement coming back, the nostalgia. People really gravitating towards those old school type desserts. You can see there the red velvet, the carrot cake, the toffee, the nougat, the strawberries and cream, the brown sugar. All of these things are kind of retro. And we think here at Kerry, the reason for that is, the Gen Z population, they are not young kids anymore. I'm a Gen Z and I'm presenting to you right now. They're grown, they're having their own houses, they're cooking again, they're reaching out to mom and grandma, dad, grandpa for all these recipes that they grew up with, and really kind of going back to what's really comforting to them. And it's also just a trend in itself to rediscover what is old and make it new. I would also call out kind of the influence that coffee has in this space. So espresso being called out, coffee, just straight up coffee being called out, and then also kind of the fruit influence, the lychee, the wild berry, and also the blue raspberry. So things that have very intense flavor profiles and impacts pair well with some of the more muted, warming flavors. Emerging in this space, I know a lot of people are probably thinking like cheesecake, cookie dough, that doesn't seem emerging. But again, think about things that are solidly around year round across all of these categories. So again, the movement of having the sweet things that taste like other sweet things, cinnamon bun, cotton candy, those really indulgent things. But I see a lot of very sophisticated things emerging for sweet desserts. So you kind of have the ginger and the apricot and the pistachio, the things that kind of have not so much of a sweet tooth immediately. Wow, that's really indulgent, that's really sugary, but something a little bit more toned down, but still delicious. And then I'd also call out the influence of savory and heat coming into sweet as well. So that Mexican chamoy, the sweet he called out specifically, and also the color influences of a lot of these ingredients. So ube with the purple, the matcha for the green, the acai and the passion fruit for those really intense colors of pinks and purples as well. So this is our Next up, we have salty snacks. So this is going to be all of your favorite bags of chips, pretzels, crackers, puff snacks, tortillas / nacho chips, etc. Anything that kind of falls in this realm. And I will also call out that this also includes trail mixes. So as we go down here, you'll start to see some sweet influences. But when it comes to the mainstream, it's going to be all of your top selling bags of chips. So the salts, the cheddar cheese, the jalapenos, just your classic barbecue, ranch, etc. Key, I kind of call it as the and category, sweet and salty, sour cream and onion, salt and vinegar. And like I mentioned before, kind of the influence of sweet things coming up into key. So cinnamon, dark chocolate, coconut, milk chocolate, caramel, think about trail mixes again and nut mixes and how you have those kind of sweet and salty pieces together. Up and coming, this one is heavily influenced by condiments. So you have the hot honey, which has been a huge one. gochujang, which kind of piggybacks off of the Korean barbecue movement, honey mustard. So again, those more just nostalgic, really classics done right mentality there. Dill, again, referencing Expo West, the dill pickle was a huge thing that we saw, a lot of new launches with that. But then also a lot of things that we saw with the savory taste chart. So the furiyaki, the elote, having a little bit of the global influence. But, salty snacks heavily is really kind of going back to the basics and doing the basics right, even with just a sweet barbecue, renovating things in that way. And then emerging, our grab bag again, and I think this one truly is a grab bag. So you see pickle again, but a spicy pickle. You have ketchup, but then you have Korean barbecue, you have s'mores, you have that ghost chili for that heat. A lot of fruit influences as dried fruits become really popular, especially in snack mixes. Coffee again being called out, French onion, all of these kind of more toned down global profiles as well, the teriyaki, the sriracha. So salty snacks continues to always be a really interesting place for innovation, and they have a lot of LTOs, and it's a great canvas to try new things out. And this year was no exception to that. Next up, we have the first beverage chart, which is going to include dairy and hot. And this also would include plant-based dairy as well. So this would be all of your hot beverages such as tea, coffee, nutritional beverages, shakes, hot cocos, coffee drinks, etc. And very similar to sweet, the mainstream, vanilla, chocolate, strawberry, caramel. But kind of an interesting thing, in the mainstream category, things don't change very drastically. Again, you kind of have to have that top spot for 5 years to have that, but vanilla did jump milk chocolate this year. So I think that also kind of speaks volumes to how consumers are kind of going back to really nostalgic, more simple classics done right. So not necessarily they want chocolate anymore, they want vanilla. Good news for me, I've always been a vanilla over chocolate girl. So that one was just kind of interesting to see, but then even just the French vanilla being in there as well. And then the peppermint being there as a huge indicator of kind of seasonal, especially around the holiday time, influencing there. Key, again, very simple to the sweet thing, pumpkin spices up there, marshmallow, and a lot of different fruit flavors. And I think in general, we've seen a huge shift of these types of beverage types having more fruity influence, not longer just being a really indulgent experience, but having, raspberry paired with a chocolate. So you kind of have a chocolate dipped raspberry flavor that kind of takes things to the next level. Up and coming, the big one here also kind of has the influence of the sweet things that taste like other sweet things and kind of the more nostalgic retro desserts. So the strawberries and cream reemerges, the brown sugar, pistachio, apple pie, birthday cake, the coffee house influence again as well, the chai, the mocha, the espresso, having more nuanced coffee offerings that have those call outs. And then also the influence of botanicals. So you see lavender in there. And I think that kind of translates more into the emerging with more of those types of things. But a lot of more indulgent things in emerging as well. So donut, cookie butter, but the cardamom for the more sophisticated approach, the plum, instead of just peach, a white peach, and so on and so forth. So again, a really good look, especially when you're thinking about just how nutritional beverages, specifically protein shakes, has evolved as a category in the past couple of years. A lot of really great innovations happening here. Next up, we have beverage for water and cold. So this will include all of your refreshing beverages, the enhancers, the waters, the soft drinks, juices, smoothies, and also alcohol would be included in here. And this one is obviously very heavily influenced by fruit flavors. Orange, strawberry, pineapple, mango, lemon, all of those things shouldn't be too surprising in mainstream. Key, again, very much just fruit forward. We start to see cucumber in there as well as more citrus blends, passion fruit, even fruit punch, mixed berry, all of these things. They definitely have a standard of identity of what a fruit punch is versus a mixed berry. But those types of blends, consumers know it's going to be some sort of fruity influence, and they're going to be drawn to that because it's familiar, but it can be very nuanced and different based on the brand. Up and coming, I think yuzu, again, is a huge one that we've seen grown exponentially in the beverage space. But then also the big trend here with these types of beverages is the influence of cocktails and mocktails. So you see they're called out Moscow Mule, you see the bitters, the hops, the all of the different Moscow Mules and the mojitos, etc. The list goes on and on, margarita. So that movement has been very, very prevalent. And again, I think we've seen a lot of mocktails expanding at all the different trade shows, Fancy Food Show, Expo East, Expo West, and then also kind of those more flashy flavors that bring a lot of punch to them, dragon fruit, blue raspberry, even grape is kind of having a resurgence, specifically Concord grape, and the chili pepper kind of bringing a little bit of spice. The spicy margaritas are obviously very, very popular as well. And then emerging, a big thing that's really interesting to me here is kind of the nuances in the berry callouts and kind of those regional berries. So the Marionberry, the Huckleberry, the Goji berry. If you lined all those up with consumers, would they specifically know what a huckleberry is supposed to taste like? Maybe not, but the descriptive intrigue of that. Everyone's visiting national parks. People are going to Montana. They know what a huckleberry is. It's from out there. Ooh, that's really exciting, but it's still familiar because it's a berry and it's still going to deliver that type of flavor profile. But a lot of the same things that we saw in other things here with the more sophisticated citrus, with the nectarine, the honeydew melon, the orange, blood orange has also been growing more on the LTO side, but I imagine blood orange will jump up to that up and coming next year. And the last one I'll call out here is prickly pear, because I think we all saw at Expo West how prickly pear is becoming the new yuzu. Lots of new prickly pear flavors out there in the beverage space, and I assume that one will have great growth in the next year. New this year, and this is the last chart that's kind of like this format before we kind of get into what does this all mean from a trend perspective. We noticed the uptick in gummy applications as a format that consumers are really gravitating towards. So this year we did make a gummy supplements chart to kind of outline how gummies and that format is growing with consumers. So mainstream is a really small list because again, the gummy category has exploded in the past 5 years, but strawberry, raspberry, all of the berries, and then more of the citrus and the peach are probably up there. But I think with gummies, consumers are ready to be more adventurous faster than they are in other categories. Right off the bat, you have elderberry and blackberry, tangerine being called out, even watermelon being up pretty high, tropical, again, a way to kind of have a lot of different flavor profiles going on. And it's kind of under that blanket of tropical, can mean a lot of different things, allows you to have a lot of flexibility in what that means. Up and coming, kind of influenced by beverages. So you have fruit punch, you have the lemonade, but then also just a lot of really good fruit flavors. The huckleberry coming out again, which is really interesting to see. The acai coming out again, but then also some warming ones, the ginger and the caramel. So having those types of things beyond just fruit flavors emerging here. And that kind of translates more into the merging. You see the dark chocolate there as well, more just regular chocolate, mint, vanilla, cream. I think I tried out peaches and cream gummy, so kind of combining what we're really familiar with a new type of format here in this space. But then also just the punchy flavors will continue to win here. The green apple, the blue raspberry, the yuzu, etc. So the last chart I have here is actually really different from all the other ones. So a lot of times we do these charts and we get the feedback from customers, okay, but like, what about this trend? What about this? What about functional ingredients, positioning, sensorial experiences, the textures, the crunches, all of those extra things. So every year our ingredient chart is kind of a hodgepodge of all those extra things that we don't really know where to put, but they're still very important to talk about from just a larger trend perspective. So when we think about functional ingredients, so obviously we know, consumers are looking for more ways to get functional benefits out of the food and beverages they're already eating. So we see here apple cider vinegar has been a huge, huge ingredient, especially when you think about all of these kind of gut health sodas that have come out, having an apple cider vinegar shot in a more pleasant way than just kind of taking it straight up. Aloe vera has been a huge one for skin. Ashwagandha, when we talk about mental health and the movement of kind of those solutions in this space. And just the list goes on and on here. I won't go through everything because there's a lot to unpack here, but mushrooms, I think, continues to grow. I think probiotics, and now we're seeing a lot more of the pre and the postbiotics. So consumers understanding, prebiotics feed the probiotics, postbiotics are the dead cells and kind of the skin, benefits you get from that. So consumers are getting more educated on all these different things. But again, just a really good list to kind of reference and to get your pulse on what's going on in the industry. Alternative, I think, having better for you swaps and also the plant-based movement has provided a lot of alternative ingredients. I think honey was a huge one at Expo West that we saw everywhere being used as a sweetener, as well as that agave, the coconut syrup, the maple, the monk fruit, stevia as well, continues to be a consumer preferred sweetener source. And then kind of more on the emerging sides. And I would honestly challenge date being emerging, because I think date is also blown up in terms of a natural sweetener in lots of desserts, ice cream bars, chocolates, etc. But oat continues to also kind of dominate, especially in that plant-based milk space. Oat is the #1 preferred. And sweet potato also is kind of emerging as well in this space. For positionings, I think just from a dietary perspective, people are still looking for dairy-free solutions. I think when we think about the plant-based movement, I know a lot of those markets have kind of tabled off or slowed down. There's less players in the space, but kind of when it comes to dairy alternatives, that continues to still have a strong appeal to consumers, mainly due to the fact that a lot of consumers have true intolerances and allergies to a lot of dairy. So there's a functional need versus more of a lifestyle and sustainability need for swaps. But low, no sugar continues to be a big one. Same with reduced sodium, especially as the WHO kind of comes out with their regulations on lower sodium and sugar guidances in different regions. And I know up in Canada, the nutritional labeling on pack is a huge thing going on. But organic continues to be popular, no additives, preservatives, minimally processed, all these things that are just making it more true food experiences, translating back into retail. Sustainability, we're actually going to talk about a little bit more in a different trend slide, but I think, anything that is better for people, planet, and society will be a winning combination. Upcycle is obviously a huge one. Our friends at the Upcycle Food Association having great success and getting more brands on board to get that official and only certification. Regenerative agriculture is a huge one as well that we saw, having it regenerative organic certified, carbon neutral, as well as all companies are looking to cut back their impact and are being held accountable for their impact. And of course, all the things with our animal welfare. And last but not least, kind of the sensorial experiences. So preparation methods, and I kind of touched on this with the smoke and grill piece earlier, but consumers are looking for those descriptors that kind of makes the concept more intriguing. It makes it more premium. It feels restaurant quality, saying that this is a caramelized onion, X, Y, and Z. This is a charred pickle. This is fried with the sauteed this. Any of those cooking method descriptions brings a lot of elevation and intrigue. And then also from a flavor standpoint, if you can deliver on a lot of these different things, that can take a lot of products from one level to the next in terms of willing to pay more for, and then also just having a more intriguing audience pull because of that restaurant at home type experience. I think emerging there, I'll call it pickled. I think anything fermented and pickled, we've seen grown a lot, especially with the kimchi, etc. But then kind of, presentation and just textorial experiences. I think that one is pretty tough to achieve in a lot of things, especially in retail. But anything can kind of give you a sensorial experience, having it foamy, having it puffed, having it crunch or crumble, making things smell a certain way, having a build your own kit, a gourmet kit, edible flowers, etc. Anything that kind of gives you the phone eats first mentality. So, what makes consumers want to take a picture of their food before they eat it kind of fits into that one. So that's a long slide there, but just again, a really great reference for all of you to have when you're thinking about what's next. How can I take things to the next level? A good kind of grounding for other things to consider. So bringing this kind of into the trends piece of the presentation. So every year, all of our regions do these taste charts, and even by country. And every year, it becomes very clear what the macro trends are. It doesn't matter where you are in the world, there are certain things that come to the forefront of being kind of the big drivers in food and beverage. So this is this year's taste trends, as we call them, and we're going to go through each of these. But I think an even more impactful slide for me is this menu adoption cycle chart, which is from Data Central, that talks about all industry macro trends. Me being type A, I went through and color coded all these things, and they align perfectly with what we're saying. So it's always kind of a good, reinforcer if you're on the right track. So for me, this was a good one to see that basically all of the industry macro trends, where you can find just about anywhere, all the way to kind of those early stage fine dining experiences, can be kind of condensed into the trends that we have here. And I'm going to just kind of jump right through all of them, starting with Heritage Remix, because I think this speaks well to what we already talked about, kind of the global influence of food and beverages in this industry. And I think, cuisine has really evolved beyond just fusion. And, there's always that question or that conversation of authenticity. What is authentic in a world where everything is a global mixing pot? What's authentic to you and what you grew up with? Who gets to challenge that and gets to question what your experience is and what you think is and what isn't? So this kind of heritage remix trend really speaks well to that. Some stats called out here. Consumers love mashups. They love kind of taking two different things that shouldn't work, but they do. And I think this Pastorama in New Jersey, they did a cashew pepe gyoza. So taking Italian food and Asian influences and kind of merging them together for something really unique. Tangle there, having that bulgogi Alfredo instant noodles, so that is typically not, a flavor profile that you would see with a creamy based pasta, let alone in an instant solution. So that one's exciting. Mr. Bing collabs with Fabalish, even just a spicy chili crisp ranch. This one's a spread and a dip. So taking one of the most common condiments out there, spicing it up with chili crisp, which we know is trending. And then even Taste Salud, having just the horchata hydration drink. A lot of hydration specific forward products are very refreshing, flavor profiles, fruity influence, but kind of having the horchata in there is really interesting for something different that we haven't seen in the hydration space specifically. So this one, you can need all the slides here. We'll have kind of examples from the charts of different flavors that call out, but all of the Mexican influence, all the Korean influence, all of the global influences here would fit in Heritage Remix. Digital palette, it kind of talks about AI and also kind of the influence that social media has on innovation. So starting with AI, I think operators, almost 1/3 of them agree that in time, AI will be better than humans at creating recipes and preparing food. So we obviously know that that is in our reality, that is in our future. And, Coca-Cola, for example, they had their Y3000 LTO that launched earlier this year was AI generated. I think they called it futuristic flavored. What does futuristic flavor, what does that mean from a descriptor standpoint? Who knows, but AI generated it. It had a lot of buzz, is really exciting. And I think that second step there speaks really well to that. The average annual growth of food and beverage launches with kind of those fantasy flavor call outs. So what's dream taste like? What's cosmic taste like? What's future taste like? But those kind of, really intriguing descriptors are growing a lot, and we'll see more of them as we go through. And then we'll also kind of have to keep an eye out for kind of like the AI generated things that don't exist yet. So I thought this Trader Joe's orange chicken ice cream was really fun. This does not exist, but it very well could in the future. You can obviously look at that packaging and kind of see there's some weird things about it. Flavors spelled wrong. There's weird spacing. The design's kind of wonky, but I think I see a lot of brands utilizing AI for kind of mock-ups on what could be, especially during April Fool's Day this week. I think we saw a lot of brands getting excited and launching all of their fake gag things. So again, just something we're all aware of and we're all keeping our eye on, but definitely AI can be a tool if used responsibly. And I think our industry will absolutely benefit from that in the future. But on the other side of things, I think it's important to talk about social media and the influence of viral trends kind of influencing innovation. So this Enlightened at the end of last year, making this, it was like chopped strawberries and chocolate yogurt bark was like a huge thing influencers making at home. So pretty simple, but this brand actually took advantage of that, saw that online, and started making different variations of frozen yogurt bark because there was such a high movement of it online. And I think there are a lot of different food trends that happen. I have a running list if anyone wants to reach out to me afterward to see what the hottest viral trends were last year. But it's always about understanding, what things should we run with, or what things should we kind of leave online and let consumers have fun with. They're not always going to be a home run, but it definitely matters to be on the pulse of what's trending online, and understanding what consumers are asking for. I think Taco Bell is a great example of consumers were, rioting online. We want the Mexican pizza back. Like, we need this. And they eventually did put it back on the menu because the outcry online was so strong. So there is a lot of power that consumers have online, but just, again, understanding when to sit back and when to activate yourself on that one. The last example here that I'll kind of call out really quick is just, the use of, robotics in our industry as well. So Sweet Green is starting to trial out their infinite kitchen here in Chicagoland. So building the bowls through automation, ordering online, I think where a lot of us are seeing there. So there's just a lot of different ways that digital tools are helping us, enabling us for innovation in this space. The next one is probably one that every trend report ever has every single year. I'll be super candid. Kerry just renames this pretty much. But thrilling comfort is always going to be that wonderful LTO. It's going to be the surprising combos, the novelty ingredients, the new flavors, the new formats, all this stuff that's really fun and kind of gets consumers' attentions and gets them excited about trying something new. What are you going to do to get a new customer to pick your stuff off the shelf? And I think, consumers want more intense, bold flavors. Consumers are also really interested in, having a sweet treat, as they call it online, treating yourselves, going out to eat, trying new things. And this category is the best of everything. Some good examples here: Snoods, an emerging brand. I think they launched at Fancy Food Show or Expo East a few years ago, but, they also kind of took the online trend of during the pandemic, people were eating pasta as a snack, but they seasoned theirs deliciously with pasta-inspired flavor profile. So this is a cavatappi noodle carbonara snack noodle. So it's shape and has that crunch of a pasta, but then also has the flavor profile that would match a traditional pasta dish, which is really, really exciting and interesting. Even sauce, marinara sauce has pretty limited innovation beyond just, cleaning up labels, making it better for you, more natural, and kind of the flavor profiles that historically come out, like, make sense, basil, cheeses, but they took the hot honey movement and they put it in their sauce, and it was absolutely delicious. So that's really exciting to see. Even just our good old DiGiorno launching their DiGiorno nuts just for International Pizza Day. So again, especially for our larger CPG customers, when you have a lot of market share, when you have a lot of equity, how do you get consumers to pay attention to you and to talk about you and to kind of get just some traffic when there are a lot of emerging brands knocking at your door? So this was just a fun gag one, but really, really funny, really creative. I would love to try a DiGiorno nut. And then our girl, Martha Stewart, she's in the gummy space, but even this one from a flavor profile, tangerine, yuzu, pomelo, lots of really great flavor profiles there. The yuzu and the pomelo are trending, but tangerine is pretty familiar, and even just CBD gummies, really, lower risk for people who are looking to explore that space. So this one is just a really easy way to kind of have a thrilling comfort experience as well. So this one, a lot of you guys are playing in this space, and this is exactly how you win with consumers, is just having a product that's really exciting and people want to talk about and people want to share with others. Next one is called I'm the Chef. So this is basically talking about the key of customization and giving consumers the illusion of choice and that they can make these products their own. So some examples here I have, if anyone's familiar with Cosmix, which is the McDonald's new concept, they just launched their next wave of stores down in Texas, but up in Chicagoland, their first store, months later, their drive-through is still, a 2 to 3 hour wait. And that's because their whole business model is that you can take their base drink and add things to it. So this is their sour cherry energy burst drink, but you can add a shot of pre-workout, or you can add an immunity shot, or you can add the boba for some textural influence. So, the illusion of being able to make this really exciting and creative drink is the base of their business. And obviously, we've seen people doing this at Starbucks for years. Those people who have the crazy order, 10 pumps of this and whipped foam and 2 inches of this, all of that thing. Consumers are always going to want that, but kind of making it more accessible and providing kind of the basics to get it done at home is also where we're seeing it translate. So American flatbread here, just having a grilled and seared sourdough crust. So capitalizing on the movement of sourdough being huge, also capitalizing on kind of those cooking method descriptors, the grilled and seared. But they sell, this one is a full build, but they also sell just the base crust. So, elevating your pizza night at home with a grilled and seared sourdough crust versus, maybe a frozen or deli prepared dough that doesn't have those types of descriptors is really interesting. I'd also call out Private Selection. So Kroger's private label brand, they did a Mexican-inspired birria cooking sauce. So capitalizing on the birria movement, that historically is a very labor-intensive recipe, slow cooking for many, many hours. So this kind of cuts that time in half, but still allows consumers at home to have that birria experience. I'd also call out Acid League, which has kind of blown up in the past couple of years. They have this sushi shop carrot ginger dressing. So kind of capitalizing on the fact that we all know sushi shops and Asian shops have the best little side salad for whatever reason, and bottling it up, and even calling it out straight up sushi shop. So people know they can have that sushi shop experience at home. And I think we know that 1/4 of consumers are prioritizing having these more elevated food and beverage experiences at home in the coming year. And people usually try new things at home first before they're willing to do it out in restaurants because of the cost implications. So all of these things are kind of really helping consumers elevate things at home and away from home. The last trend I have here kind of speaks to that sustainability piece we mentioned earlier, which is empowering eats. So this is all about consumers prioritizing brands and food and beverage products that focus on nourishing people, planet, and society. We know that consumers are making lifestyle changes because of all of the global issues of concern, climate, people, war, personal health. There's a million different reasons that could fall into that. And they're also looking for brands to make sure they're being very transparent and forward on why they have that competitive difference. How is this brand better for me? How is this brand uplifting the hands that prepared it? How is this brand, giving back to the earth in which it came from? So some great examples here. Jeam Seaweed Snack from Chicago. Not only is it woman owned and Gen Z owned, but I think, seaweed snacks in general are very, very sustainable coming from the sea. This one also has no added sugar. It's vegan, so it has all those better for you claims. What If Noodles is an interesting one because they looked at kind of the instant ramen industry, and those products, spoiler alert, are not very nutritionally equipped. The noodles are fried. There's a lot of sodium in them. They're absolutely delicious, but how can we make those things better? So they have a line of where they swap the noodles. So this one is a pumpkin noodle base with a cheeky curry seasoning, kind of having that global flavor influence as well with higher protein, etc. Filimanana, Filipino American Kitchen, their banana ketchup, I believe they just got upcycled certified, which is a great claim, but also just kind of the story of banana ketchup in itself. Tomatoes were in shortage during wartime, so they started using bananas for that condiment need, and then obviously minority owned, so kind of stacking these stories, elevates this brand beyond belief. And I think this last one here, Sly, kind of more talks to kind of the for me type mentality. This is for brain and body recovery, and that orange cream dream beverage, has multiple functional benefits that are better for me. That really is something that we've seen consumers gravitating towards, specifically in the beverage space. So in summary, there's a lot of different ways Your products, your consumers are looking for foods that empower them for a number of reasons. And we'll continue to see brands really bringing this to the forefront of their messaging, of their marketing, and of their ingredient statements. So to kind of summarize everything, and to kind of bring it back to the taste charts and the taste trends and all of these different pieces I've presented, a new thing that we did here at Kerry is talking about category relevance against these trends. So I obviously can tell you that empowering eats matters, and we all know it matters, but where is it specifically like really, really empowering people? So this is an example from beverages. So of all the different beverage types, the ones that consumers associate most with empowering eats as a trend is those non-alcoholic mocktails. Mostly driven by the fact that it is no alcohol, so it's better for you. Up next is smoothies, due to the movement of lower sugar and kind of just the infusion of all natural, real fruits, etc. And then number 3, obviously all of the functional adaptogen drinks. So the things that have all those added functional benefits are kind of the top 3 here of what consumers would consider being a more empowering eats choice. And then one more step forward, and this will be my last slide here, is kind of taking what we saw on the taste charts, and because they're so broad, but kind of honing in on now, okay, what flavors specifically for this application? So these again are those top applications for empowering eats, and now these are the top indexing flavors. So if you want to launch a product that is on trend, has a really great sustainability story, this is a great roadmap to understand what flavors should you definitely start considering. And I think it's no surprise here that a lot of these flavors for empowering eats as a trend are up and coming and emerging. So exactly where you want to be when it comes to beverage innovation. But a lot of the berries, the Moscow mules, a lot of all of those really exciting things that we talked about being front and center here for what consumers feel is the most relevant and the most important when talking about innovation. So this is just a snapshot of that. If there's any specific application you're really interested in and want to learn more about, feel free to shoot me a note, email, LinkedIn. But that is all I have. So I'm happy to take some questions, and I see that the chat is starting to pop up a little bit. So Adrian's monitoring.
Yes, happy to jump in here.
Yeah.
Thank you, Amy. Do you want to stop sharing your screen so we can see you in full view?
Absolutely. Stopping sharing. Perfect.
That was so much information and so cool to hear. So thank you. The first question is, can you please explain the methodology of how you build the taste charts?
Yes, so our taste charts are comprised of both food service and retail data from our data partners that we have here. So we have about 5 industry known data providers that we work with. And then we also have our own proprietary research method team in-house. So then we kind of combine all of these resources together. We have a proprietary formula, and then we go and we consult all of our R&D scientists and culinary and mixologist experts in-house and kind of validate with them, is this actually a flavor? Is this an ingredient? Is this being used for color? Or is this being used for flavor? Do you think this actually is reflective of the asks that we're getting as a business? And then we combine them and make these charts that way. So we've been doing this for about 10 years. And we do this globally. So we have these for Mexico, we have these for Canada, we have these for China. So any other country of interest, we do this regionally as well.
Great,
I think the next question, yes, we will get these slides. Absolutely. Thank you for answering that one, Adrian.
No problem. I do have another over here. So how much does sourcing or lack thereof affect the flavor choices? Are there some flavors that are difficult or too expensive to source?
That definitely takes into effect here. I think at Kerry, obviously we sell seasonings and flavors, etc., but we really want these charts to be holistic and reflective of what's going on in the market, regardless of what outputs we have with it from our business standpoint. So I think a good example of this one is a few years ago, black garlic was like huge. And I remember everyone being like, oh, but we can't source black garlic. It's so hard to find. But our insights director is like, doesn't matter. It's trending. We're putting it on the chart. So again, this is part of our marketing arm of our business, and just being able to provide right? The value of understanding what's going on in the industry is just what we pride ourselves on. But definitely sourcing is always a problem with different ingredients. But in terms of a trend standpoint, we don't hold back because of that at all.
Thank you. Okay, the next couple are a little loaded. So global food is said to continue to be on the rise for a few years now. However, we consistently see that African foods, especially West African, is not rising to be included in this up and coming next global flavor trend. We see small emerging brand representing this global flavor. However, we see distribution lagging behind to make this product easily accessible. What do you think is attributing to this global trend not raising?
Yeah, and I kind of touched on this, excuse me, earlier. And I think West African and like piri piri and harissa kind of had a moment there where they got a lot of recognition. But in terms of kind of the true emerging flavors across Africa, and obviously there's a lot of different influences, whether it's Ethiopian, Moroccan, the list goes on and on here. I think it all comes back down to like the right brand needs to be the one that's launching it. I think there are a lot of really great emerging brands that are starting to bring these types of products to the market, and it absolutely makes sense for them to do it because they have kind of that story that they are minority owned. If one of the larger global CPG tries to launch one, yes, it's more mainstream, but consumers will immediately know, like, this isn't authentic. This is just another big brand trying to take advantage of a trend. So I think with that, there are consumers for that. Absolutely, African cuisine is very trending. It's right on the cusp, I think, of going from emerging to up and coming because it has been in that kind of tight spot for a few years. But I think what's going to really take things to the next level is having brands that have a really great story around it, and that piece about consumer education. I think of all countries, regions, Americans are the most hesitant towards Africa because people even just say Africa. There's hundreds of countries in Africa, but consumers are just very misinformed about what's going on over there. So having a brand story that helps educate consumers and brings them along in that journey is the way that we're going to get more brands growing in that space.
Next question is, there's been a significant amount of talk and price action around the impact of GLP-1 drugs for snack companies in public markets, such as Coke and Hershey. Most of this has yet to materialize since the drugs are currently so expensive. How is this something you're looking at with flavor preferences and snacking choices with consumers who are taking to these products?
Yeah, so GLP-1, the magic conversation these days. And I think right now, I think it's important to understand that the percentage of consumers who are actually using it are still under 15%. But we do know that weight loss drugs are going to continue to grow. They're not going anywhere. But what we're seeing, and we've done some initial proprietary research on this as well, is that, consumers, when they're on these drugs, eating kind of becomes a hard experience. It's not enjoyable anymore. A lot of side effects, a lot of sickness, a lot of just not wanting to eat at all. So that's when you need to really hone in on the flavor profiles that consumers want. People still want to enjoy their food experiences. They still want it to taste really great. So just making sure they're making products that taste great, because I think historically better for you / nutritionally optimized products lack in that space. So having taste solutions, if it is lower sodium, building back the mouthfeel and the taste of salt, not just having a boring flavor, still giving those products an innovative flavor choice is really important to consumers to make them feel like they're having a normal experience still. I'd also say the big conversation on GLP-1 is also, adding more protein, because that is a big thing that consumers are also losing when they're on these drugs. But at the end of the day, we still need to treat these products like any food product. They should taste good. Taste is king. Taste will always be number one why someone buys something. And especially when we think about the genesis of why these drugs were invented in the first place, these are for medical reasons first. I know it gets a lot of attention from celebrity usage and misusage, but there is such a large population who need these drugs to live. So humanizing them and making sure we're making solutions that are actually accommodating and inclusive are going to be important moving forward.
And in a follow-up to that question, have there been any trends towards less sweet flavors or trends for those with blood sugar issues or on blood sugar drugs?
Yeah, I think sugar reduction, low sugar, absolutely is a huge thing. Full transparency, a year ago, Kerry did a piece of proprietary research called Sensibly Sweet that kind of outlined what consumers' expectations and preferences are for lower sugar applications and what sweetener sources they're looking for. So stevia is number one. But at the end of the day, also consumers are not super aware of the food science of what's making their flavors, how they taste. But lower sugar is everywhere. I know at Kerry specifically, we're using modulation tools that help build back the sweetness impact that is removed when you have sugar. So building back the sweetness is the biggest key when you're having lower sugar applications. And then there are also just a lot of flavors that naturally have more flavor impact that are good to pair with these types of products. So a lot of the flavors we talked about, the ones that have like really intense punchiness, a lot of citrus flavors, a lot of berry flavors will naturally bring a lot of that sweetness. So it is kind of it depends on your application. It depends on how much sugar you want to drop to. Definitely we have scientists on staff here that would love to talk to you about that. But again, I think it's the same thing as GLP-1. You know, consumers are looking for the exact same amount of options that are on trend and exciting as they would for full sugar products as well.
Can you share more about how blood orange is an empowering eats flavor?
Yeah, so I think this methodology, in full transparency, you know, consumers were given a list of flavors and asked to identify which ones just kind of resonated with them. So I think just blood orange in general is a very emerging flavor, a very new, exciting flavor. It's a sophisticated version of regular orange. So I think it's also the association that they're seeing blood orange in products that are better for them. So there's a lot of different factors on why consumers think it is. But also in the same breath, there's a lot of things that consumers just say, that's how I feel. And there's no way to really change or understand why. And we kind of have to listen to that piece of it as well. But that slide is just really interesting to just see what kind of rose to the top. Not necessarily that it's a absolute go from a brand standpoint. You obviously got to ask your consumers what they're asking for. Do they know what blood orange is? Are they willing to accept that? But just in general, I think a lot of just the up and coming and emerging flavors resonate and over-index with a more sustainable and forward-thinking trend as a whole.
Thank you. Could you explain the trend of sweet things that taste like other things? Is this using natural flavors or alternative sweeteners?
So that was more holistically about the flavor profile itself. So like having a ice cream that tastes like cheesecake, having a cookie that tastes like a mocha latte is kind of what I was talking about that. Because I think, remember, looking at these charts, keeping in your mind, it's not like the dish or the ingredient, it's the flavor of that thing was kind of what I meant by that.
How would you suggest prioritizing the messaging for a functional ingredient? Is the emphasis the ingredient itself or the functional impact?
Yeah, I think that definitely depends on what type of product you are and who your audience is. You know, if you're a nutritional fact panel product or a supplement fact panel product. But that's actually a great segue into research we have launching this month that basically outlines what consumers want for functional benefits. And a big finding with our research shows that, you know, it's all about the need state. You know, consumers are looking for gut health. They're looking for immune health. They're looking for women's health solutions. So starting broad within there, and then understanding who your consumer base is and kind of driving down specifically what their needs are and what they're looking for. And I think again, based on your consumer, having either very broader messaging, you know, this is good for your gut, you know, all those better for you sodas. It's all about gut health, very specific. But then, you know, there's some products that are like, here's the science behind why it's good for it. So there's definitely a mix and play depending on your product and depending on where you're at. You know, Canada, you can't label probiotics, but here you can. Lots of different nuances. I'd love to talk to you more about that offline, but yeah, it really depends on the product, the consumer, and the need state.
We just have time for a couple more and then a quick announcement at the end from our chapters. Regarding the question about less sweet, where are the flavors that are natural and not bitter or weird tasting? Stevia tastes horrible. I use the low glycemic sweeteners that don't taste horrible.
Yeah, so I think like these trends, like it doesn't matter if it's a lower sugar version or if it's using X, Y, and Z sweeteners. Like if your consumers want a yuzu pomegranate flavor profile, like they're not thinking about like, oh, they better be using X, Y, and Z sweetener. They're expecting it just to be a really great tasting product and also appealing to their dietary needs. You know, if they're looking for a zero sugar product, they're still expecting it to taste like a full sugar product, you know? They don't want to compromise on taste. They want the best tasting product as well. So I think all of these flavors absolutely should be in consideration for a lower sugar version, because at the end of the day, consumers just want it because of the description intrigue and the actual flavor itself, not because they're associating it with being a lower sugar type flavor.
What is the typical timeline between when something like ubi or peri peri becomes a common ingredient in major cities like New York City or LA versus when it breaks into the top two tiers of your rankings on a national level?
Yeah, I think just in general, the innovation like timelines have expedited incredibly in the last 5 years. So I think if you went to Expo West like 5 years ago, they'd be like, oh, you know, innovation cycles usually take, you know, 1 to 2 years. Now it's 6 months, you know, so things are speeding up, and you know, the influence of social media, the influence of an influencer promoting something will, you know, obviously impact how those things develop. But in terms of our methodology of the chart from emerging to mainstream, we usually say anywhere from 5 to 10 years to get from emerging up to mainstream or key. Because again, to go from emerging to up and coming, that's 3 years. And then to go from up and coming to key is 5 years. But definitely, you know, innovation cycles are faster than ever. And I'm sure we all feel that. And, you know, the cultural impact of things too is just, you can't put a price on that, of having the right marketing and having the right moment to really accelerate your brand or your product or your flavor.
And the last question is, are you seeing Hascat Berry on trend?
I think that is a very, very emerging one. So it'll be fun to kind of see how that evolves. I've seen a few things on it, but it's not mainstream by any means. So maybe you're on to the next big thing. So we'll keep an eye on and check back in next year for the taste charts and see if it makes an appearance.
Amazing. Thank you, Amy, so much. This was
Absolutely.
incredible. Paul, so happy we got to host this with you guys.